Welcome to the SMB Advertising podcast, where our aim is to help 1 million small and medium-sized businesses to succeed with their advertising. My name is Mike Damjanovic, and I'm the host of this special podcast and an Adline special. My aim is really to inspire, to educate, and help everyone listening to succeed with their advertising. Today we have a special guest joining us. Jonas Faizi is the VP of Marketing in a tech startup company named Recognition, which is providing traffic and customer insights to the physical retail. So it's kind of like Google Analytics for stores and shopping centres. He's previously worked at some big names, for example, Coca-Cola EP Norway, with their B2B Digital marketing. He's worked for an inbound marketing agency as an inbound consultant, and he's also worked as brand manager in Komplett Group. So if you're from Scandinavia, that's komplett.no. He's newly married, no kids yet, but one dog.
Yes, that's correct.
And you're originally from Haugesund, but you've settled down now in Lørenskog, which is just outside of Oslo. So Jonas, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. Happy to be here and happy to be able to provide some content for you and help you with this amazing podcast.
Perfect. So before we get started, there's a name here on your CV, Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And what I would like to know is which, between us, Pepsi Max or Coca-Cola?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot. I can say to all of you, it's Coca-Cola, of course. I absolutely love Coca-Cola. I have nothing poor against or bad against Pepsi at all. But for me, it's just a taste and the special occasions soda for me. Yeah.
Good. It's good to get that out of the way. So today we're going to be focusing on how a startup or a small company should be marketing themselves.
Yes.
You obviously got a lot of insight there. So we can actually start with what it is to be a startup company or a small company. And maybe a bit about the goals and the OKRs, the objectives, key results for a startup.
Yeah, I can. So a startup is often a tech startup or tech business that's really just starting out with the intention to grow quite rapidly with the use of innovative technology, which is what we are doing right now, for instance, in Recognition. So one of the key objectives and key results or goals, we tend to use OKRs more at new startups, I guess. But one of the key objectives there are to, for instance, get funding. You can grow your company. You can get that first customer or pilot agreement in place, and then produce a proper MVP or a minimum viable product, which is basically the bare minimum of what you're able to sell. That's I guess that's it.
Yeah, and I think obviously you, as a startup, you have these different goals, which we've mentioned now. The MVP, obviously achieving product market fit, getting that first pilot customer in, and then of course perhaps one of the most important things, get the funding in. It's kind of perhaps a silly question, but why are those goals so important?
So these goals are quite important to understand and have a solid understanding of, because as a marketer, we need to know what's best for the startup or for the company itself. We cannot rely on what we've previously done before or how we previously created an ad or a marketing campaign, for instance. You need to know what's best for the business. And sometimes you probably have to do, or quite often actually, you probably have to do something that's not directly marketing. For instance, marketing is closely aligned with sales. That means myself, I'm a marketer, or at least that's my title, but it could very well be a salesman, or I'm also a safety representative in my company right now, so I'm leaning into the HR bit of it as well. So it's basically everything, and you need to know what's best for your company in order to perform as a marketer.
Okay, so now we've covered, what a startup is, and the types of goals and OKRs that they should be focusing on. And we've also looked at why it's so important to have those goals and to actually have those objectives and key results. But how do you actually get started then with the marketing side?
Yeah, so marketing a startup can be quite different from each company you go to. It depends on a lot of variables. For instance, do you have funding? Do you have sufficient funds or a budget? What time will your company go bankrupt, basically? Yeah. What's their overall goals, an instance? And it also depends who you're selling to. That's probably one of the most important key aspects, what's your audience? And you can separate that into a B2B or B2C, startup. So if we take a look at the B2B, for instance, a B2B software as a service company, which is quite often what tech startups are, the most vital thing you have to do is to have a proper, solid go-to-market strategy. So what you need to do in order to develop a proper go-to-market strategy, first of all, you need to know your audience. You need to know their needs, behaviors, and what makes them tick. You need to know how your product or your company is positioned in the existing market or a new market, depending on what you're selling, basically. You need to have a proper pricing strategy, and you need to know your competitive advantage. All of this goes into your key messaging, which we'll talk about later, and you also have to know what resources you have and where you can spend them and how much, of course.
So, developing a solid go-to-market strategy. So just to summarize, defining your audience. How are you going to attack the market? You need to know who your audience is. How to position yourself, how to position your company. Pricing strategy. Fun fact there, I think people looking at their pricing, they spend less than 6 or 7 hours on average on their pricing.
Wow.
Which is one of the most important things.
Yeah, that shocks me.
You need to look at your competitive advantages, and obviously by doing that, like you said, you need to look at competitors, and then all of this will go into your key messaging. And then, so you've got your go-to-market strategy. You know kind of what you need to say, what you need to, how much money you've got, your audience. What's next?
What you need to do once you've figured out your go-to-market is you need to do the second part, which is how to connect with your customers or potential customers. So you could do that in a million ways. Often for a B2B SaaS startup, it's having a website with a freemium model or free trial. You can do it by creating a lot of content. Like this podcast is a great example of quality content that you can find in various resources. Yeah, welcome. And there's loads of ways to do it. But I guess content ads, for instance, would be a great example to just check upon. To quickly create or generate awareness and potential leads as well. Whereas a content strategy would take a lot of time often to gain the same amount of leads and awareness. Ad strategy or ads in general would help you realize that goal quicker, but it would cost you more. From here on out, you need to know which marketing channels you want to be available in. So that could be email marketing, that could be social media, etc. Ad marketing as well. But most likely it's a mix. Often it's a mix, and you might not end up having time to do it all. So you should probably focus on at least one channel where you use the maximum attention you can. But in reality, you won't have time to do everything yourselves because you have to do a lot of other stuff. So, for example, at Recognition, we leverage LinkedIn. So we instead of having Facebook, Instagram, a Snapchat, a TikTok, LinkedIn, we focus on LinkedIn because we know our audience fairly well, but and we know they're on LinkedIn, so we provide content that's helpful to our customers and to VCs or possible investors once in a while, I guess. Whenever we have something to show.
Yeah, and I guess once you've got this in place, you've got your go-to-market, you've got your messaging, you know which channels you're using. You start pushing out, then you can start selling. Yeah,
basically. So I remember from, was it your last episode or a few episodes ago with Lauren from VC company? She mentioned that the reality of startups is that you never have time to do everything you want. Like ads, you won't have time to spend as much time on the copywriting and the design of the ad as you probably want. And that's why and that's the reality. So sometimes you just have to do 80% and move on to things that's bigger, and you need to know and keep in mind your company's objectives or goals. That's the most important thing I've learned, at least. Instead of getting fixated in minor tasks. Basically. So that's B2B. Could you say a bit on the B2C products? Okay, so for a B2C customer or consumer, often, it really depends on your positioning, your product, and your value propositioning. So there's a million ways to convert a B2C customer, but often you need to start with gaining awareness, the standard sales funnel or flywheel or buyer's journey, whatever you want to call it. You need to start with gaining awareness about your product. If not, nobody will know it. And you can do that a million ways. As we've talked about before, you can do it with SEO and content organically, for instance, but it will take you a lot of time. And for a B2C product, you might not have the time to gain the #1 rank page on Google. So quite often you might need to start with a few ads. You can do that by testing, or you can use ads to exemplify testing. Your key messaging, just spend a few bucks on it and see which ones perform best and resonates with the same audience. And you can do quite a lot of things for B2C, but creating the awareness before converting is the #1 thing, and converting will become way easier once you have enough traffic, basically. And I think that's probably the biggest difference between B2C and B2B. B2B tend to use a lot more time to buy in comparison to B2C startups. So now we've looked at the go-to-market strategy, and we've looked at the goals, we've looked at the messaging, the audience, all of those factors, and then the difference between B2B and B2C and the way that you should be marketing. One thing that I want to ask you or pick your brains about is budget. So being in a startup yourself, I presume at some point you wanted to start ads, but you maybe didn't have a huge budget or any budget at all. But what happens then when you don't have this budget to run ads or pay for marketing initiatives? So this is where marketers tend to thrive, or at least I think they should. And that's because this is the part where you get to be creative. So this is one of the parts that I love about startups and also working with marketing. So for instance, you could start with PR, contact newspapers and talk to them about your product or something that's happened to you, how you've raised funding, for instance. Give them a story, and they might write about you, and you'll soon see that they have a far wider reach than you could probably have at this point of your company. You can do social media. You can reach out to your network and stuff. Most people have quite a bit of a network if you think about it, and if you check your LinkedIn and just contact people and see what you can do. And like concrete examples could be, you know, contact say top 20 influencers in your network or in your category, and see what they will be able to do with your product. You know, see if they can try out your product and have a reel or story or something about it. Yeah. So if there's one thing I found particularly important in this setting, is that you have to get creative with how you can showcase your customers' challenges and how you can display your value proposition. I think that's really the essence of it. How can you answer their problems with your solution? Yeah. And for instance, I know Coca-Cola, like you can check it out on Instagram anytime you like. Whenever there's a new flavor from Coca-Cola, they tend to use influencers, at least here in Norway they do. And they tend to use influencers to spread awareness about a new flavor. And as a result, they test it, they drink it, and they rate it usually. And that gives a solid reach about, oh, there's a new flavor in social media, and it attracts the right audience as well. Yeah.
That's really good, and I think, you know, we're no strangers to having a limited budget or no budget at all. So as a small or startup company, really getting these customer testimonials, for example, or showing how your product or your solution or your service is helping a specific company or customer with their problem. That's really great input. So thank you very much for your points on how to market, or how a startup should be marketing themselves in terms of whether they're B2B or B2C. We're going to be listing up each of the points that you've put here, everything from value prop to go-to-market to audiences to the pricing strategy, which maybe you can come back and we can do a talk on that as well.
Yeah, sure.
And then obviously what to do when you don't have much budget, what you should be doing. Should you be doing nothing? Absolutely not. You need to get creative. And I think that's actually one of the keys to succeeding in 2023 when it comes to advertising or marketing. That is being creative.
Absolutely.
So we're going to link to your LinkedIn profile, as you say you're using that quite a bit, and also to your website. And thank you very, very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Perfect, yeah. So thank you very much for listening and following along. That's Jonas Faizi from Recognition.